And this is going to be another Game of Thrones / A Song of Ice and Fire Q&A video. And I appreciate all the questions in the comments. Keep them coming. And I'll keep these Q&As coming. And keep sending them in for Star Wars videos as well. I enjoy doing all these Q&A videos. And today I have about 5 or 6 questions, but I'm going to save one for the very end that addresses a very popular current fan theory. And that is the R plus L equals J plus M theory. So our first question comes from Josie, and Josie writes, "Good video, mate. For your next Q&A, what is your opinion on the wildlings? I think they are so cool. They are treated bad having to live on the other side of the wall, and they get killed so fast it's so annoying. It doesn't give you time to know them. Do you think they will get to the point they'll become part of Westeros society?" So yeah, I think the wildlings are just that. I mean, I think there's been a lot of misunderstanding for the last 8,000 years or so, and I think Jon Snow put it best when he says they're just born on the other side of the wall. You know, you had this apparent truce 8,000 years ago at the end of the Long Night, and the humans that were just up in the air before the wall was built, however you believe that was built, whether it was by Bran the Builder as we were told, or by way of some kind of magic, perhaps even the others themselves, to keep man out, they essentially just ended up on the wrong side of the wall, and they just kind of formed their own society without the kings and lords and that type of thing. So I don't think they're any different from Westerosi citizens, so to speak. I just think with the lack of resources that far north, they were kind of forced to climb the wall and come around the wall and that type of thing and raid villages and stuff like that, which doesn't justify, because they did obviously kill a lot of innocent people, kind of George R. R. Martin's way and his particular views in politics, perhaps, on saying, you know, they're really no different from the people down here. It's just a different culture, so to speak. They all to come together, and that's where kind of the Jon Snow figure comes in as this kind of uniter versus divider, where he wants to end the conflict. He sees a greater struggle in a common enemy.
Why can't we all just get along?
Just kind of being on the, what we're calling the wrong side of the wall, just by happenstance of where they were born, building their civilization and society up north of the wall. But then you could look at their side of things and say that the people in the south were born on the wrong side of the wall because they live in a more free society, where they don't have to deal with kings and lords and battles between different kingdoms and that type of thing. I think like any group of people, they have their bad apples, and in the end they're all human. This 8,000 years of warring is ultimately got to come to an end because there's a bigger story here, and that is the others. Or is it humans? And for our next question, Suzanne writes, "I'd like to know what you think about the HR equals HP theory for your next Q&A." So yeah, you're referring to the fairly popular theory that Hallan Reed equals the High Sparrow or High Septon. I actually like this theory. I think it's pretty neat to think about, because we've never seen Hallan Reed. He would be the only one left alive in relation to Jon Snow's parentage, and who would actually know about that. Him being the one that went with Ned to the Tower of Joy and found presumably a baby there in a bed of blood, and seemingly disappeared for the last 14 or so years. However, I don't think this theory is accurate. First off, the idea of the theory is great. I think that it'll be kind of cool if Hallan Reed, in order to take revenge on the Lannisters and all the wrongs that was done to the Starks, since him and Ned were described as great friends, they were Stark bannermen and loyal to the Starks in the north. I think that would be a great story for him to kind of infiltrate King's Landing and become the High Sparrow, get his revenge that way by reinstituting the Faith Militant. I think that's a great concept. However, I really don't think it's plausible. First of all, Hallan Reed is from the north. He is of the old gods. And if you know the High Sparrow story, basically, in a nutshell, he has gone around for years and traveled around Westeros, performed marriages and helped out the poor to build his following in the Faith of the Seven. So it took him a long time to basically travel around the countryside and gain support and gain followers and learn the Faith of the Seven and do all these things for people to end up coming to King's Landing to become the High Sparrow, and that wasn't a guarantee. I could see this theory a little bit more if there was some kind of definitive plan where he would actually become the High Sparrow and he knew he would become the High Sparrow. But in this case, it would be too much of a huge risk just to go around for years and years traveling the countryside, abandoning your original gods, learning a new religion to essentially fake your way into King's Landing as a Septon of the Seven, just to get in and take revenge on your enemies for the Starks. Because he essentially could have planned that, but he really would have never known if that would have came to fruition or not. He could have traveled the country for years and did all the things he did and never made it to King's Landing and become the High Sparrow. This would have to be done for years and years before Robb was ever killed, before Ned was ever killed. He sent his children, Mira and Jojen, over to Bran to swear fealty to Robb when he was out fighting the War of the Five Kings. So he wouldn't have had enough time to then make a plan, send his children to Bran at Winterfell, and then travel around and learn the Faith of the Seven when he had been of the old gods. That's a hell of a chance to take. Basically fake a new religion, or maybe perhaps even actually turn to a new religion, learn that, gain a following, get to King's Landing, become High Sparrow, take revenge, destroy all your enemies from within. As a matter of fact, George R. Martin himself has said that we will see Hallan Reed in a future book. And King Joffrey you bastard, writes, I'm kidding, Joff, I know you're not the real. Hey man, I was wondering if you think there's an ice dragon beyond the wall or frozen in the wall. Don't know if the theory has any truth to it. Also, do you think Bran will fly a dragon or maybe just become the three-eyed raven? So yeah, there are a lot of cool theories about ice dragons. George R. R. Martin did do a separate story about an ice dragon, and I think there's something to that, and I believe that's probably in the same world as Westeros is. I don't think that there is an ice dragon in a Game of Thrones or a Song of Ice and Fire. Not that it wouldn't be really cool. I wouldn't mind that a bit, but I think just based off the duality of ice and fire, you already have a magical set of beings called the Others or White Walkers who can manipulate ice Sub-Zero style, as I've said in the past, and those guys identify with the Great Other. And then you have the dragons who breathe actual fire, and they're related to the Red God R'hllor on this side as far as the opposites or duality of this whole entire ice and fire thing. I think if you brought in ice dragons, either from beyond the wall where they supposedly has been spotted, and even the cool theory about maybe one perhaps being frozen in the wall, George R. R. Martin wasn't originally going to even put these dragons, as far as fire-breathing dragons, in the story. He was going to leave those out and make it more about people and less about magic. It took somebody basically talking him into actually including dragons in the story. I don't think he's going to also put ice dragons. I think that would actually throw the balance out of proportion. Fire dragons over here, and then ice dragons, and they're described as a lot bigger than fire dragons. Then I think you take the others out of the equation. You have fire-breathing dragons on here, and then you have ice dragons over here, and then you would also have the White Walkers, who may or may not want to control those ice dragons, but at the same time, they both would have magical properties and magical powers. You throw the balance off as far as the fire dragons. Yes, you have people controlling them, but those people are not magical. They can't manipulate fire. I don't think there's ice dragons in this story. However, I do think we will see the wall coming down one way or the other, but I don't think an ice dragon is going to pop out of it. And our next question, Lynn Ann asks, for Q&A, excellent review about Targaryens and fire. Do you think Jon Snow will raise his funeral pyre with his sword ablaze as Azor Ahai? If life has to pay for death, will Melisandre be burned with him by the Night's Watch? So yeah, this is something I've stated before actually in other videos where I think there may be a parallel moment when they burn Jon's body. So we know he's now been stabbed and presumably dead, although we're not 100% sure about that. He could just be severely wounded, although if he can live from that much blood loss, then that's a hell of a comeback in this kind of world with no hospitals around the corner. But I do think that is one of my theories, and I've stated it in previous videos, I just didn't do a separate video on it. I think since Dany and Jon are parallel characters and she had her great moment, hatching dragons in season 1, one of my theories is as the Night's Watch burn Jon Snow's body, because they know now they have to burn bodies as far as what they've seen with the Whites. I had speculated that perhaps Jon Snow will have a funeral pyre scene similar to Dany's, and he will not burn, and perhaps Melisandre has something to do with that. Whether she knows in advance, we don't really know, or whether something happens while he's actually burning, and then she discovers that. There's a lot of speculation on how he could come back, but I do think there actually may be a scene very similar to Dany's, and that he will have a funeral pyre and will not burn. I think Melisandre has to be involved. Whether she's involved before they light the pyre or after, I can't say, but I do think that's the case. Now, as far as the sword goes, I don't really think there's a literal sword in this Azor Ahai theory. As a matter of fact, I don't think that Azor Ahai, as far as the prophecy itself, may actually even be true. As far as having to fit every little thing that this previous last hero or Azor Ahai had to go through. So it was said that the original Azor Ahai tempered his sword Lightbringer in the heart of Nissa, his wife, and that's when her essence and soul and fire or flame, so to speak, went into the sword, and he pulled out this flaming sword. But I don't necessarily think that's absolutely necessary. I think since we've seen Jon with a Valyrian steel sword that people call red swords or dragon steel, he's already killed a White Walker. It blocks their ice swords, and he actually killed one, so I think that in itself is enough. I don't think they need a literal flaming magical sword to shoot out laser beams or block blaster bolts from the White Walkers. I just don't think that's necessary. I think that Longclaw, being his sword, will be Lightbringer if he is this Azor Ahai character. And that's the weird thing about prophecy. Is prophecy is something that you learn about and then you go out and try to fulfill it? Or is it something that you become and then you learn about who you are? So we saw where Stannis was told he was Azor Ahai, and he tried to go out and actually fulfill every little thing that Melisandre had told him to do, and she tried to literally make him fit the prophecy of Azor Ahai. Jon is already out there doing what he thinks is right, so he's Azor Ahai in the sense that he's trying to look out for the sake of the entire kingdom. He recognizes the true nature of the true threat of the White Walkers or the Others coming to destroy all of mankind, while you have people in the Seven Kingdoms fighting on who's going to sit on the damn pointy iron chair. So I think in that sense, he's Azor Ahai, and somebody may label him Azor Ahai like Melisandre. I don't think he necessarily has to be holding a flaming sword. But then again, I could be completely wrong. And as far as the Melisandre piece, I think that if she helps Jon to be reborn, as far as recognizing who he is, which he already kind of has, I think, think, before he's actually burned, then they may celebrate her, or he may celebrate her, although he may not quite be the same. They see some shit like that, they're gonna realize, okay, you can't touch this motherfucker. We got to follow this dude. So I don't necessarily think that Melisandre will then be labeled as a evil person. I think she is actually doing what she thinks is right and what she thinks is the best thing for all of mankind, even though the thing she does comes across as bad or evil or what have you. It's pretty damn horrible to burn people, but if you look at it from her perspective, where she feels the weight of the world on her shoulders, she does these things for the good of everyone and to save the entire planet or world or whatever the fuck this place is. And finally, Darren writes, R plus L equals J plus M. What do you think about the theory that says Lyanna had twins and Mira Reed is Jon Snow's twin sister? So yeah, this is a very popular theory right now, and I wanted to address this, and I kind of saved this for the end of this Q&A to go ahead and put this out there. I was going to do a separate video on this altogether, but honestly, there's not a whole lot to say about it. So I actually did do a separate video on the R plus L equals D plus J theory, where so many people have been commenting and messaging me asking me what I thought about them being twins, so I'll link that in the description below as well. But as far as the current popular theory that Mira is the twin of Jon, again, I think it's kind of cool, but honestly, I just don't see this being the case. There's really no reason for it. And as far as I know, the person who actually created this so-called theory, I believe was on Reddit, if I'm not mistaken, and I believe something was taken out of context or something was changed and people got that impression, but then he had deleted the post or something. I'm not sure. Maybe somebody can remember and fill me in on that, but I believe it was actually kind of a mistake. Anyway, to answer the question, I just don't think there's a lot of reason for it. First of all, a lot of people were using the show and the fact that Mira Reed and Jon Snow kind of look alike as far as the actors go as evidence to support this theory. You can't use that whatsoever. These are actors in a show. Everybody looks completely different from the way they're described in the books. Another thing is, this would suggest that when Ned and Howland Reed went to the Tower of Joy and found, in this case, Jon and Mira, that Ned took Jon back to Winterfell as his bastard son, but Howland Reed took Mira back to the Neck and pretended that this was his actual daughter. So why would he not claim that it was his bastard daughter? There would really be no way for him to say, oh, by the way, honey, here's our real kid that I found down here at the Tower of Joy in Dorne. I don't know how you missed having birth or whatever, but here she is. Another thing people throw out about this theory is that perhaps this is why there was such a bed of blood that Lyanna was supposedly found in. I talked about this in the last video I just did on the Jon and Dany twin video. Just having twins doesn't mean anything as far as death during childbirth goes in this world. There's been plenty of people, Targaryens, Lannisters, many other houses that have had twins and no complications, and there's just as many people that die during single childbirth as there is during people dying with twins. The other thing is that Mira, in the books at least, is actually described as looking like a Crannogman. She's described as having green eyes and dark hair and that type of thing, looking like her father and her brother. That's specifically pointed out in the books. There's no real evidence either, even in the books, as far as looks go, as the way they're described physically, of them looking alike. And the last thing I think a lot of people have thrown out there is that Alfie Allen quote that he threw out there about, Jon Snow's parentage having kind of a Star Wars theme to it. Basically, they're using that quote to say, well, Luke and Leia were twins in Star Wars, so that means Jon had to have a twin. No, not really, because before Leia was ever discovered to be in the equation, we had to learn that Luke had a secret father that was still alive, and that's really, I think, all that Alfie Allen was referring to. The last point I would make is simply, there's really just no literary sense to be made of Mira being Jon Snow's twin. I essentially think that Mira is there as a supporting role to Bran. I think her job in the story is to help Bran get to Bloodraven. Really, that's all it's there for, is to kind of link the fact that Howland Reed helped Ned in his quest as far as in the war, and then post-war when he went to the Tower of Joy with Ned. So I think that's there just to kind of continue that Reed-Stark alliance, where now Jojen and Mira are there helping the next generation of Starks fulfill their destiny, so to speak. So anyway, that's it for this week's Q&A. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I have more Star Wars videos coming, as well as Game of Thrones. In the meantime, click here for the last video I did on the R plus L equals D plus J theory about Dany and Jon possibly being twins, and you can also click here for the last video I did, which is a collaboration with Bar from BarTube, and we talk about the top 5 characters gone missing on a Game of Thrones or a Song of Ice and Fire. Thanks again, you guys, for all the support. Really appreciate it. Don't forget to subscribe to get everything. Leave me a comment, tell me what you think. Thanks for watching, you guys, and we'll see you next time.